Good evening. My name is Bob Taylor. I'm the library manager here at the Archives and History Library. I'd like to welcome you all to our Tuesday night lecture program. This is the February 5th program, and we have a great program for you this evening. But before we introduce this evening's speaker, I'd like to go over some of the upcoming presentations. On March 5th, we'll have Dr. Billy Joe Payton, and he'll be doing the history of Charleston. That should be a great one. On April 2nd, we'll have Dr. Charles Ledbetter, the West Virginia State College Aviation. It'll be a program on Tuskegee Airman Connection in the Experiment. May 7th, we'll have Russ Barber, Reconstructing Bill. June 4th, Dr. Karen L. Cox, Dixie's Daughters. And for the Tuesday programs, we will have on March 14th, we'll have Doug Wood. It'll be a lecture on cornstalk. So that should be a very exciting lecture. And we're looking forward to that. And for February 21st, coming right up here in just a couple of weeks, we're going to have Greg Carroll, who just recently retired, and he's going to be doing a Native American presentation. That should be very exciting. And on April 11th, he'll be doing another one on African American genealogy, and that should be another very exciting presentation. I'd like to say that any of you that are not on our email list that would like to receive upcoming notifications, please check in with us as you leave and get your name on our list, and we'll make sure you get notifications. And at this point, I would like to introduce tonight's speaker. Tonight's speaker is John Lilly. He's the editor and folklife director for Goldenseal magazine, and he's been with the magazine for many years now. And this evening he's going to discuss the history of Goldenseal magazine, and he's also going to discuss the Wheeling Jamboree and the WMMN Sagebrush Roundup and WCHS's Buddy Starcher and the Sleepy Jeffers shows. When I grew up listening to the Sleepy Jeffers show, and got my first introduction to some of the great performers on that show, and got to hear and see Fiddlin' Mike Humphreys for the first time. And that was very exciting to me because I learned a lot of my music, you know, from Mike Humphreys. And John Lilly is a 1996 graduate of Davis and Elkins College. And I think it's very exciting that he was a tour guide at the Country Music Hall of Fame and Museum in Nashville, Tennessee, and a former associate editor for the Old Time Herald magazine, which is another great magazine for West Virginia's heritage music. And he has also been an editor of the book Mountains of Music, West Virginia Traditional Music from Goldenseal, and he has written countless articles on old-time music and many other styles of music. And another thing that a lot of people may not know that is in this audience, John Lilly is a great national and international performer. He done an extended tour just recently all over the United States, and I think he went into Canada, and he has been in Ireland and Scotland and many other, you know, countries. He is just a national and international treasure when it comes to touring and performing. So with no further ado, I'd like to introduce to you not only just a West Virginia treasure, but a national and international treasure, John Lilly. Now to hand to Bobby Taylor. I'm just curious, how many of you subscribe to Goldenseal? Glad to have some subscribers here. The rest of you, I hope you'll subscribe before the end of the night. I did set some magazines out. If you somebody got to yours before you got to your table, let me know. We still have some up here. These are samples. We do charge for the magazine. It's a subscription, but just for you tonight, to let you have these as samples. The evening is going to be divided into roughly halves. I'm not sure if it's really going to be half and half, but the first part we'll be talking about the magazine, and then we'll somehow smoothly segue into the magazine's treatment of traditional country music. Which button, of course? There we go. I have to tell you, I just learned PowerPoint. So you'll see some really amazing things. And I might need some help at some point. But it's my pleasure to edit Goldenseal magazine. I'm only the third editor in the history of the magazine. It's been coming out for 39 years now. That's the current issue. For those of you, is anybody here just really not familiar with Goldenseal? Never seen it, never heard of it? So most of you are generally familiar with what the magazine does. We're very proud to have 97-year-old Jessie Beard Powell on the cover of this issue. We got a lot of comments about it. She's very well known in Pocahontas County. Lives in a house that was built in the 1800s, and you can read about her in the winter magazine that you see on the tables. West Virginia traditional life. That can mean almost anything. The magazine was founded in 1975, and we'll talk a little bit about the roots of the magazine here in a second. It has its roots actually in the state centennial. I'll get to that in just a couple minutes. Published quarterly. That surprises a lot of people. They keep talking about last month's Goldenseal. Well, it's 4 times a year, and that comes up just as soon enough for me. I don't know how people do monthlies, much less weeklies. Can you imagine doing a weekly? About 14,000 readers. It's actually, people ask how our numbers are doing. Our numbers aren't great. We could use a few more subscribers, and you could help us by telling your neighbors about the Goldenseal as well. We are still self-supporting, we're still in the black, but our numbers, like most print publications, aren't doing what we'd like to see them do. But right now we have about 14,000 subscribers. Now they tell us in the magazine business that there's an average of 3 people read every publication, so actually the number of readers might be double or triple that number, but that's the number of magazines that come out here per quarter. Mostly in state, about 70% of those magazines are distributed through the mail here in the state. We do sell a tiny, tiny fraction of them. Newsstands, they sell them down at Taylor Books. A few little newsstands around the state carry them, but most of the people who get Goldenseal get it in the mail. In addition to all 55 counties, it goes to all 50 states and currently 6 other countries. We've been up as high as 12 foreign countries, but currently 6. Where they go to Japan, Australia, Canada. Can't remember, there's 1 or 2 really exotic ones. And you'll notice if you look through the magazine, there are no advertisements. And we also don't get any grant support. It's supported by the people who read the magazine. It's subscription sales. So that's part of why it's important that if you support what Goldenseal does, what the Division of Culture and History does, and especially the folk arts and traditional life, it's one way you can support it is by subscribing to the magazine. It's $5.95 for a single issue, 72 pages, it's a bargain. And $20 for a year, $36 for 2 years, and the big bargain, $50 for 3 years. Can't beat that with a stick. And it's put out by a staff of me and 1 other person. Kim, would you raise your hand? No, she won't, but she's right there. That's my assistant. How about a hand for Kim Johnson? Longtime circulation manager and Secretary Cornelia Alexander retired in October. And right now it's Kim and me. So
we somehow get it done. Not without some help, but a few quick facts. In 1975, the Department of Commerce and its Arts and Humanities Council started Goldenseal as the successor to a magazine called Hearth and Fare. This is every one of the Hearth and Fares. How many of you have ever seen a copy of Hearth and Fare? Gerald, you're about the only one. Did you take pictures for me? Yeah, I expect you did. Were you working for Commerce at the time?
I did.
Hearth and Fare was a magazine. It started out as a newsletter. This was the first one. I should back up. For the state centennial in 1963, there were a lot of initiatives started around the state, a lot of programs emphasizing the history and heritage of West Virginia, and attempting to draw people's attention to the great culture that exists here in the state. And one of the things that was started in 1963 was the Mountain State Arts and Crafts Fair up at Cedar Lakes up outside of Ripley. And as it approached its 10th anniversary in 1973, the Department of Commerce, which was running the festival, of the Arts and Crafts Fair, decided that they wanted to put out a publication to celebrate some of the crafters and talk a little bit about how they did their handicraft and what their home lives was like, where they learned, interviews with them, some pictures, and just to drum up some interest for the 10th anniversary of Cedar Lakes. So they hired a young man named Tom Scriven to interview these people. Tom was an authority on folk art and craft, and they put them out, and they started at 8 pages, and they got to 10 pages, and 12 pages, and 14 pages. By the time the 10th anniversary rolled around, it was a 34-page magazine. And after the 10th anniversary, they still put out a couple more Hearth and Fairs, and that's what became Goldenseal. 1975, it became Goldenseal. In 1977, that's when this building was built, and the state established a division, actually they called it a Department of Culture and History. This was the Science and Culture Center at the time, and it became part of this operation as it still is today. When it first came out, it was distributed for free. Let me say that again. It was free. Tom Scriven would set up at these festivals, and all you had to do was give your name and address, because they were trying to collect a body of people that were interested in the folk arts, that were interested in receiving information about West Virginia traditional life. And for the first 6 years, it was absolutely free. You couldn't pay for it if you wanted to. And the numbers grew. The first couple of issues, it was just a couple thousand people, and the numbers grew to upwards of 30,000 people at one point. And so finally the state realized that they were going to have to ask people to help contribute to this. And so Ken Sullivan, who was editor at the time, initiated something called the voluntary subscription. I personally think that's an oxymoron. These two words that don't usually fit together in a sentence. But Ken made it work. He was the son of a preacher, and he knew how to ask for money. And it worked. They managed to get people, not everybody, but the majority of the people, to realize the value of what they were getting in the mail. They got used to it. They didn't want it to go away, and so they would voluntarily send in the money. Once a year, he would just ask. He didn't send mailings like nowadays. You got my renewal notices in the mail and stuff. He just would put in the fall magazine, it's time to do your share. It's time to step up and do the right thing. And he'd give this little sermon. And sure enough, people would send in money. When I became editor, Commissioner Renee Conlon informed me it was time that this voluntary stuff came to an end. So I was the hanging judge, and we went to mandatory subscription, which is what it is now. We still do send out some complimentary copies. If you're in prison, you get the magazine. We send about 10 copies out to people in penitentiaries, and I'm not going to shake them down for the $20. There are a few people who get the magazine for free, but 99.99% are contributing to the magazine by subscribing. PowerPoint's working pretty good here. We're a staff of 2 to run the magazine, but actually it's a staff of probably 102 when you count all the contributors, our designer, our printer, our staff photographer here, Tyler Everett. we not only welcome freelance contributions, we really need them. And I'm hoping some people here will pick up our contributor guidelines, which are right on the table there. I'll talk a little bit about what's in them. But we live off freelance contributions. A lot of people call up and they say, well, there's a wonderful man who lives down the road from me. You ought to send out a reporter to interview him. I go, I have to explain that as freelance writers, I said, well, why don't you go interview this person and see what you can do as far as writing the manuscript. Do we have any Goldenseal contributors here? Anybody? Not a one? Not a one. JD, you haven't read an article for Goldenseal. Your son did, I know that. Eric did. But anybody can write. We've had, how old was the hamster girl?
About 7 or 8.
We had a 7 or 8 year old. We had a 97-year-old. No, she was 96 years old. And we do pay 10 cents a word, $25 for original photography. And we invoiced this woman. We sent her some paperwork to reflect her payment that she was going to receive. And she wrote back the sweetest note and said, thank you very much, but I don't think I can afford to write for Goldenseal anymore. No, we're paying you. But we get handwritten manuscripts. We get them in all kinds of computer formats. We take manuscripts from a number of sources. The only thing we do not generally use is stuff that's been published elsewhere. We don't take stuff out of other newspapers or magazines or books. We do try to get authors, even if they've written about a subject previously, to write something that's first going to appear in Goldenseal. And what we get is first publication rights. The authors retain their copyright so they can publish it elsewhere. Manuscripts average between 2,500 and 3,000 words, and you can do the math as far as what that means in terms of a payment. Some manuscripts come in, if it's not 500 pages, it's not even going to be one page of the magazine, so I try to discourage very short manuscripts. Anything over 3,000 words, the editor has to do his work, and it becomes a 3,000-word manuscript. If you look on the back of the magazine, those of you who have a magazine handy, you'll see our parameters. It has to take place within the state of West Virginia. The author does not have to be in West Virginia. The person who the story is about does not have to be a native of West Virginia, but the activity of the story takes place within the 55 counties of West Virginia and in the last 100 years. The reason for that is the magazine emphasizes oral history, first-person accounts, people who've been there and actually experienced what the story is about. You get beyond 100 years, it's hard to find someone who has a living memory of that. And it keeps the magazine focused on life within the 20th century for the most part. Which means that we don't carry articles about the colonial period, generally not the statehood period, although we are going to celebrate the sesquicentennial in the summer issue, and we'll get a little bit into the statehood and Civil War period, but for most of the magazine is in the last 100 years. I get letters and phone calls from freelance authors, hired guns, say, well, send me out on a story. What do you got? I say, well, what do you got? I really have learned over the years that if someone writes about something they know about, something they're involved in, something they're committed to, something they have intimate familiarity with, it's going to be way better than if you send some reporter out, spend 10 minutes or 3 hours getting the once-over and go home, type it up, and send it in. Those articles, they're on the surface. And if that's what you want, and a lot of magazines, that's all they have time for, all they have room for. Our magazine, 2,500, 3,000 words, there's got to be some depth to it. And so if someone knows about a particular community, if they know about a particular school or a particular folk art, particular sport, they're going to write a much better story. So I always encourage authors to write what they know. Write about your own town, your own family, your own neighbors, your own relatives, your own self. That's much better for us and much better for our readers. This is a bit of a controversy. If you send in a manuscript, I like to get the hard copy. I'm a paper guy. I'm really proud of this PowerPoint, but I much prefer to hold the paper in my hand and So some authors, especially these hired gun freelancers, bristle that they can't submit their articles electronically. They can submit electronically. We just encourage the paper submissions. And with our wonderful staff of 2, it sometimes takes us a while to read them all. What do we have right now? About 40-some manuscripts in the pile? I get to them as quick as I can. But as Ken Sullivan has said, story selection is our most important work. All the other details that go into it pale in comparison to the selection of the stories that go into the magazine. So we give it as much time as it takes. We read the stories, I send them back for rewrite, I request revisions, I turn them down flat out, or I accept them. But every manuscript gets read. There's not a manuscript that doesn't cross my desk and get my full attention. And every potential contributor gets a personal letter from me explaining whether we can use their story, and if not, a brief explanation as to why not. So it takes a while. Please be patient with us. Guidelines are online. I also have the print copy of contributor guidelines over here with some tips and some of the reiterating some of what I've told you. Also my business card. And I do encourage you to think about contributing. If you're here, you're interested in history, I can tell. I can tell by the look in your face. This subject interests you, and certainly there's a story you have to tell, and perhaps we can tell that in Goldenseal. We're very proud of our photography. We have the State Archives right here in the building, and they give us hundreds of wonderful images to work with, as do our story contributors and our story subjects. Mining, hunting. We had a wonderful issue dedicated to coon hunting. And we have this great picture of this coon dog. He's up the tree, and he's barking up this tree. And we sold a lot of those magazines to coon hunters. And then they wrote back later and said, we thought this was a coon dog magazine. I tried to explain it. Well, that was a coon dog magazine. They're kind of a single-minded bunch. Anybody recognize what that is? That's Valley Bend, one of the settlement communities out in Randolph County. The New Deal is a big deal for us. We have a lot of articles about the Depression era and what we did to alleviate some of the suffering during that time. This was one of them, these settlement communities. A lot of articles about chickens pulling girls in sleds. Not really. We used to run something called a photo curiosity in the inside back cover. This would have been a photo curiosity. I have no idea what she's doing. Gina's Cottrell? Traditional music, as we're going to discover here, has been bread and butter for Goldenseal ever since the first issue. Same with front porches. There I am on the front porch with a 105-year-old story subject. Topics that we cover, the list is endless, but these are some of the important ones. Coal and coal mining, right at the top of the list. Education, one-room schools especially, but all kinds of educational stories. Sports, we have a wonderful story coming up in the next issue about the first West Virginia State High School girls basketball tournament. Went from 1919 to 1924 in Spencer. And they decided it wasn't healthy for the girls to be playing basketball, and they suspended the tournament for 50 years. Religion. Cover a lot of church histories, a lot of topics related to faith and religion. Crafts, of course. Women's history. This has always been a subject for the magazine, and more we get stories about the lives of women in West Virginia. Goes without saying. Architecture, crime and punishment. I love these crime stories. I mentioned the New Deal, of course. Ethnic communities. If you want a topic that I'll jump on top of as soon as it crosses my desk, I love stressing the diversity of West Virginia. I know that the state is one of the least diverse in the Union, but there is diversity in West Virginia, and I think it's important that we learn more about it and talk about it. And we do have stories in the magazine, but not enough to suit me. So stories about African Americans, Native Americans, Jewish immigrants, anything that stresses the diversity of the state is very welcome. subject. Photographers and photography, I love this subject. You're going to see a great photography exhibit in the next issue of Goldenseal, a man named Sam McCulloch. Commerce and industry, that can be almost anything, from an antique store to a steel mill. Logging, rivers and riverboating, trains and railroading, agriculture, radio and TV, towns and townspeople. We do have an index online if you go to our website, and you'll see it just goes on for pages, all the different topics. So again, think of ideas that are close and near and close to you. 1973 and 74, I already mentioned Hearth Fair. It started out to be just about crafts. Then it expanded into being about all these other topics and became Goldenseal with the founding editor, Tom Scriven. Tom still lives in the area. He was a very talented and energetic, somewhat driven man. He came up with the name Goldenseal, by the way. I asked him, I said, how'd you come up with Goldenseal? And he claims that it had to do with something that was native to the state, that was beneficial. Goldenseal, for those of you who don't know, is a medicinal herb, usually called yellow root. And it grows in the woods, and the old people know where to find it, the young people have to ask. And that's what he claimed. He claimed it had nothing to do with the gold dome or the blue and gold of WVU. We get a lot of people asking us about our herb magazine, and we have to explain, like with the coon dog thing. There it is, the first issue. The woodcut drawing, that's volume 1, number 1. If you find one of these, they're very collectible. We have people who get in touch all the time wanting these early issues to complete their collections. This, believe it or not, is the only country music cover of Goldenseal. We were looking for that when we were trying to put together the publicity for this event this evening. And this is the only one. It was back in 1977. In 1979, Dr. Ken Sullivan he wasn't a doctor at the time, he got his PhD while he was working here. Ken is currently the director of the West Virginia Humanities Council. I'm sure many of you are familiar with Ken. He really had a lot to do with making the magazine what it is today. That's his first issue. You can see the way the cover had changed from those early covers. Ken has his PhD in industrial history, and it's a very strong topic for him. For Tom Scriven, his passion in life was West Virginia traditional crafts and wood carving. For me, it's music. For Ken, it was industrial history. So he put out this special issue in the spirit of Mother Jones, and really shifted the emphasis away from folk life and crafts to more of an industrial and historical publication, though folk life and crafts remains an important part. In 1985, I thought this was one of the most beautiful covers. The Division of Culture and History hired a photographer named Michael Keller, who was instrumental in the look of the magazine for the next 15 years. It changed the look. This is the only issue. Talk about collectible. This is the only issue. You notice they put the banner across the top in all caps, and that's called Cooper Bold, is what that typefawn is called. Ken must not have liked it because this is the only issue that came out like this. The next issue it came out like this. And this, for those of you who are fans of the magazine, is a very familiar look. It stayed this way until after I was here. I introduced some changes. Ken told me this was his favorite cover. He's got it framed and hanging in his office at the Humanities Council. I love this cover. Melvin Wine was a great musician and a good friend, but this is very collectible. This has a big boo-boo. See if you can find it. That's what you don't like to see coming back from the printer. For those of you who haven't noticed, West Virginia is misspelled. We haven't had that happen since spell check was invented. I was hoping Ken would be here so he could explain this particular one. This was the 20th anniversary. He put out this beautiful commemorative edition with highlights of the magazine's first 20 years and little updates. And this was a collectible magazine in its own right. But someone at the print shop was a 49ers fan. And if you can see that, it was supposed to say miners do not be deceived, terrible strike is on in Colorado. And he changed it to Niners. Can raise some hell over that. I thought this was another very successful cover of John Henry. Then in 1997, I love that guy. Shouldn't give me this PowerPoint. But I came here from Davis and Elkins College and been editor ever since then, coming on 16 years now. That was my first magazine. Ike and Mike with 2 oxen, Daniel Richmond was the keeper there. And we had a party out at his house to celebrate that first issue. It was such an achievement for me to come in as a total greenhorn, and there was we just were very excited. We went out there and had a party, and he gave me, when these oxen are born, they're raised together. They put them in a yoke when they first begin to walk, so that every step they take is in unison with their partner or their yoke mate. And he had a little tiny yoke about this big, hangs on my wall right behind my desk. He gave it to me that day, but this is their full-grown one. They gave us all rides on a sled. It's fun. There's our redesign. For the 25th anniversary of the magazine, we went ahead and used the different type of lettering style, also a different type of binding. You notice it has the squared-off binding with the room to put what's on the magazine. That's called perfect binding. It's part of the new look of the magazine. That's one of my favorite covers, photographer J.J. Young. 30th anniversary, we put Mac Samples on the cover. Some of you might know Mac. Another beautiful Michael Keller photography there. The oddly controversial chicken issue. That's not a chicken, it's a rooster. Isn't a chicken a rooster? Goldenseal has put out 3 books of edited, well, 2 of them are edited collections. In 1992, I mentioned Ken Sullivan is a specialist on industrial history. He put out what was the first book on the West Virginia Mine Wars in 1992. A number of good books have come out since then, but this edited collection was the first I'm aware of to come out, and it's now in its 5th printing. Speaking of diversity, we got a grant to research West Virginia ethnic communities, and we revised it in 2005. We're about out of them. It's available online, but we've identified 72 currently active ethnic communities in West Virginia, and we're hoping to update this report in the next couple of years. And now, my big achievement, I edited this book, Mountains of Music, for the 25th anniversary of Goldenseal. We have this in the Mine Wars book for sale here. They're not free, but they're for sale. This is a subject near and dear to my heart. What drew me to West Virginia in the first place was the music. I've been playing traditional music for many, many years, and I came to festivals in West Virginia, and I went to the Augusta Heritage Center up at Davis and Elkins College and took a job there, and then when the job came open here, I applied for it. So it was the music that drew me here, and the music that still very much excites me. Before we go into the musical portion of the presentation, are there any questions about anything I've talked about so far? Anything to do with the magazine, contributor guidelines? Yes?
You just take the whole manuscript, you don't like a preliminary letter or anything, you just read the whole manuscript?
Yeah, that's in the guidelines. I much prefer an inquiry, letters suggesting a story, a few sentences, maybe a couple paragraphs. I prefer that rather than someone just take the time and effort to write a 3,000-page manuscript if it's nothing I can use. Thank you for that question. Any other questions? We'll go ahead and dive in. This program, how many of you were here when Bob Taylor did his heritage music program in this same space? I know I was here. Helped him out a little bit. Bobby is one of the best fiddlers in the country, and He plays the authentic traditional music. And the fiddles and banjos and ballads are really the lifeblood of West Virginia's traditional music scene. Country music is something a little bit different. Country music has a commercial component to it. It generally is performed in front of an audience. It's recorded. Many of the people who play country music have gotten paid for it. Some of them made a living. So there was a start. The country music industry, as we think of it today, had its start in 1927, something called the Bristol Sessions, when a New York recording executive went down to Bristol, Tennessee, Virginia, but he set up on the Tennessee side, and put an ad in the paper and said, come make a recording for the Victor Talking Machine Company. His name was Ralph Peer, and some of the people who answered his ad included the original Carter family, a man named Jimmy Rogers, who you might have heard of, the father of country music, the Stonemans, and a couple people from West Virginia. This is considered the beginning of, in fact, at Bristol now they call it the birthplace of country music. And no one's really arguing with them because that's where country music really got its start. One of the people from West Virginia, one of the very first people to record was Blind Alfred Reed. Take that PowerPoint. Let me read you just a quick passage. You got the author of this? Did I write this? Yes, I wrote this. Sometimes I write articles in addition to editing them. These were the years leading up to the Great Depression, and Blind Alfred Reed was fighting valiantly to support his family through his music. A gifted songwriter, fiddler, and singer, Alfred also played the guitar, banjo, mandolin, and organ. He taught music lessons, played for meetings and dances, made recordings, and sold printed copies of his song lyrics. On many days he made the three-mile walk from his rented farm to downtown Hinton to play and sing on the streets for loose change. He was also an ordained Methodist minister and occasionally preached at local churches. So when he heard they were paying $50 a song to make a recording in Bristol, he made his way there. This is one of his song sheets. He sold these on the street. I don't know if you can read it, but I'll read just a couple words. I charge you no admission fee, no money I require, till after I have played for you, then give me what you desire. 'Tis hard for me to play and sing 2 hours and sometimes 3, but I will make this violin ring till satisfied will be. Now friends, please help me all you can. You know what you can give. Someday the Lord will say, come in, you've helped the blind to live. He played with a fiddler named Fred Pendleton, who we'll see here in just a minute, in a group called the West Virginia Night Owls, in addition to performing as a solo artist. His recordings for the Victor Company were very popular, and they're also very topical. He wrote songs that had to do with issues of the day, as well as religious topics. Watch this. Some of the song titles that you might be able to read: Explosion in the Fairmount Mines, Fate of Chris Lively and Wife, How Can a Man Stand Such Times? Actually, the full title is How Can a Poor Man Stand Such Times and Live? That one was recently recorded by Bruce Springsteen. Money Craving Folks, Prayer of a Drunkard's Girl, Why Do You Bob Your Hair, Girls? And Why Do You Bob Your Hair, Girls #2. Woman's been after man ever since. So some of it was humorous, some of it was tragic. Most was political or topical in some way. He lived on a farm. An ugly rumor spread. It was very disturbing to his family that he had starved to death. And they quickly and vehemently dismissed that rumor, that he was well cared for, he had a farm, and his family was with him up till the end. He died in 1956. Here's the only problem. Can I get a drum roll, please? Oh, darn it. Bruce Springsteen's version adapted those lyrics to Hurricane Katrina. It was definitely the same song. A tribute album for Blind Alfred Reed came out a few years ago with a lot of important artists on it as well. Also at the Bristol Sessions, Blind Alfred Reed was one of the first people to record at the Bristol Sessions. One of the final acts, in fact, the final act to record, was a West Virginia group called the West Virginia Coon Hunters. See, can you see the little red thing there? That's Clyde Meadows. His son, Darren Meadows, came into my office with this collection of pictures, said that his dad recorded the Bristol Sessions, and I said, no way. And he said, yes way. But it was a confusing bunch of pictures, trying to figure out who was in the band and how the band that recorded at Bristol, he was correct, the band did record at Bristol, but it wasn't that many musicians, you could tell by listening. And so we tried to figure out who was in the band, what all these people's names were, and it was quite a goose chase for me to try to figure out who all these folks were. There's their names. Clyde Meadows, he was right there. And Fred Pendleton, the fiddler who was with Blind Alfred Reed a few minutes ago, on the slide a few minutes ago, was part of the group. What we figured was that it was just a loose conglomeration, and anybody could use the band name depending on how well the gig paid. That's the best we could figure out. The good gigs got all, what have we got there? 9 of them. The cheap gigs got the 3-piece. The really cheap gigs got the 2-piece. But this is as best we could figure, it was probably these 4 musicians who recorded at Bristol. Can I get another drum roll, please? You gotta keep it going. I gotta do it. Come on. See, you gotta get aggravated. That was string band music, but it was recorded commercially and was kind of modern for its day. A solo artist who was also an important recording artist, he did not record at the Bristol Sessions, but he made over 200 recordings in the 1920s and 30s, was Roy Harvey from the Beckley area. Let me read you just a quick passage here and talk about the significance of Roy Harvey. How many of you have ever heard of Roy Harvey? Nobody. Well, Blind Alfred Reed made about 16 recordings. Roy Harvey made over 200. Here, I'll read you a passage from this article by Matt Meacham. Between 1926 and 1930, Roy Harvey participated in 5 recording sessions in New York for Columbia Records as a member of Charlie Poole's North Carolina Ramblers. Harvey also recorded with Poole and other musicians under the names the Highlanders, the Allegheny Highlanders, and sessions for Paramount and Brunswick labels. Among the selections that Roy Harvey recorded with Charlie Poole are White House Blues, Take a Drink on Me, If the River Was Whiskey, Monkey on a String, Goodbye Sweet Liza Jane, If I Lose, I Don't Care, Sweet Sunny South, Flop-Eared Mule, Milwaukee Blues, You Ain't Talking to Me, and Old and Only in the Way. All of these songs are now regarded as important components of the string band repertoire of the period, at least in part because of Poole's recordings of them, and several are still performed frequently by traditional country music and bluegrass musicians. If you play music, you recognize some of those titles, and they were a direct result of Roy Harvey and his work. His daughter was living in the Beckley area at the time, and it was a pleasure to get to know her and interview her. Here he is with Charlie Poole. Have any of you ever heard of Charlie Poole? He is very well known, kind of a rascal, and Roy Harvey kind of kept him straight to some extent. He also played with a lot of local musicians. These are all West Virginia musicians here: Vance Weaver, Earl Shirkey, Wiley Weaver, and Odell Smith. And he recorded guitar duets with Leonard Copeland, another West Virginia musician. I'm going to need that drum roll again. Come on, that's what makes this thing work. Oh, see? This is a parody of the West Virginia Hills, called Moonshine in the West Virginia Hills.
In the West Virginia mountains, we have sweet and flowing fountains. On every little hill, we have a still. Bright light on Broadway, the sun shines down in Dixie, but we have moonshine in the West Virginia hills. Oh, the hills, those beautiful hills. We have moonshine in the West Virginia hills. Bright lights on Broadway, the sun shines down in Dixie. We have moonshine in the West Virginia hills.
What's the best part? I'm no kin to the Lilly brothers, but I was proud to know them. They are well known all across the world. The Lilly brothers played with neighbor Don Stover and introduced countless new fans to the down-home music of southern West Virginia at the peak of their popularity during the mid to late 1960s. Singing tight brother harmonies and playing at breakneck tempo on guitar, mandolin, banjo, and fiddle, they are generally credited with bringing authentic mountain music to New England in the 1950s and then in the 1970s to Japan, and keeping it alive here in West Virginia. Everett just passed away last year, or the year before. But they were very ambitious professional musicians. Born in the 1920s, and about 1940 they were performing at their WWVA on that picture. This is in 1948. I don't know, can you see them? I struggle to get those circles to work in this PowerPoint. But here, in case you can't see, there's Everett and his brother Mitchell. Actually, Everett and B. Lilly, it's actually even though his name is sometimes spelled B-E-A as if it was short for Beatrice, which it's not. His middle initial is B, and he went by B. Though there, you can see it says Mitchell Lilly. But Everett and B are there. And Doc Williams, Wilma Lee and Stoney Cooper, Hawkshaw Hawkins, a lot of people at the WWVA Jamboree, of course up in Wheeling during the peak of its popularity. Oh, they're from the Beckley area, Clear Creek, Raleigh County. Tex Williams, Tex Logan up there, the fiddler from Texas, and Don Stover joined Everett and B. They went to Boston, and they initially called themselves the Confederate Mountaineers, and they dressed up in these outfits, and they got called out a couple times by the Yankees up in Boston. And then they just became the Lilly Mountaineers after that, I guess. They went to Japan in the 1970s and credited with helping to popularize bluegrass music in Japan. And I'm going to need that drum roll one more time. See, it's not working until you get the drum roll. See, there, the drum roll works. How's the volume? All right? Don Stover on the banjo. First time I heard this music, I have to tell you, many of you know I was not raised in West Virginia. I got here as soon as I could, but I was born in Illinois. And I went to the University of Illinois, and the first week of my freshman year, I went down to the record store, and I saw this record by the Lilly brothers, and I thought, my name's Lilly, and it's not a common name there as it is here. So I thought, I gotta buy this. I've never heard these guys before, and I took it back to my dorm room, and I listened to it. I brought it back to the record store. I said, this is at the wrong speed. So they sound like they're singing way too high and playing way too fast. That's the way you go back to your dorm room, buddy. Now it sounds perfect to me. Another important string band to come out of West Virginia, the Lonesome Pine Fiddlers. They come out of Mingo County, and it was 4 brothers. See if I got their names right. Ezra Klein, Curly Ray Klein, Charlie Klein, and Ireland Klein. And they formed the band in 1938. And they, although they never made it to the upper echelon of bluegrass musicians like Bill Monroe or Flatt Scruggs, let me read you a list of bluegrass musicians who came through that band and graduated out of that band to contribute to bluegrass. I already mentioned Ezra, Curly Ray, and Charlie Klein. Ireland, Lazy Ned Klein, died in the Normandy invasion. But other musicians to come through their band included Bobby Osborne, Larry Richardson, Paul Williams, Melvin Goins, Ray Goins, Jimmy Martin, Rex and Eleanor Parker, Udell McPeak, and Ray Morgan, and quite a few others. So kind of a who's who of people in bluegrass music came through the Lonesome Pine Fiddlers. Cousin Ezra, although he played the clown on the stage, was a shrewd businessman, and he ran the band and was the only consistent member. His brothers even came and went over the years, but it was his band, and he was the business manager and the rhythm guitarist, and sometimes he would play this Cousin Ezra comic character. 3 of the 4 Klein brothers. There's Bobby Osborne, Larry Richardson, and Ray Morgan. Gonna need that drum roll again. See, it doesn't work unless you do the drum roll. See, there it goes. Thank you. This was their theme song.
Oh, how I like to be upon a windy mountain, where the treetops scrape the sky. Then I would forget all my worries and my troubles. I'll just let the wind blow them by. Oh, I love the sound of the wind when it's howling. Oh, it blows the blues away. It makes me forget the girl that I'm loving. Let me forget until another day. Let me hear the leaves on the trees when they're singing. Just a moment of relief is all I care. For I've got no sorrow, heartaches, or sadness, as long as I can see the trees that sway. Oh, how I like to be upon a windy mountain, where the treetops scrape the sky. I'll just let the wind blow them by.
Lonesome Pine Fiddlers. Melvin Goins still plays music. He's one of the last surviving members of that band. And he calls his band Windy Mountain. Melvin Goins and Windy Mountain. Well, one of the pivotal stories in West Virginia music history has to do with an Alabama native, Hank Williams. Those of you who know anything about me, you know I'm a big Hank Williams fan. We do a Hank Williams tribute every year, and it's in commemoration of his death in West Virginia on New Year's Eve, or New Year's Day 1953, New Year's Eve 1952, depending on when he actually expired in the back seat of his Cadillac. A lot of people don't know that he was on his way to Charleston. It's often told that he died on his way to Canton, Ohio, and that's where his New Year's Day show was, but his New Year's Eve show was right down here at the Municipal Auditorium. It sold 800 tickets, and there was a crowd of people waiting for him, and he actually got to Charleston in the air. He got to Knoxville and took an airplane, but they couldn't land because of fog here at the airport, and they sent him back to Knoxville, where he got back in his car, and the rest is sad history. I had the pleasure of interviewing all the surviving people who were involved with that show, including the promoter of the show, his driver, Charles Carr, and a number of the musicians who were sitting here in Charleston waiting for Hank Williams to show up. And there is no two people tell the same story. Some say, oh, it was a horrible snowstorm. Someone said, no, the weather was fine. Someone says, the show went on. Oh, there was no show. We didn't even go to Charleston. So memory has a way of skewing things. But this is the ad. I discovered it right in this room. Municipal Auditorium, big New Year's Eve. Some of the people who were here. Remember Homer and Jethro? They were here. Hawkshaw Hawkins, Autry Inman, Red Taylor, Jack and Daniel, the Webb sisters. It was what they call a package show. And you wouldn't... $1.85, 75 cents for kids. Fred Scott's Record Shop on Summer Street was where you got your tickets. I've never talked to anybody who was at the show or who bought a ticket, but it was part of our history here in West Virginia. Hank Williams. Now this is going to be in the next issue of Goldenseal. This article, this hasn't been published yet. The Sleepy Jeffers and Buddy Starcher show. How many of you remember seeing them on TV? Yeah, a good number of you. For those of you who don't know, Buddy Starcher was a big radio star in the 1940s and 50s, and in 1960 he introduced his show on WCHS TV with a pretty good cast of his wife and a number of other musicians who played with him. And they were on TV every day, 7 o'clock in the morning, live. And sometimes they would be on as much as 90 minutes. And they would sing songs, they'd do comedy, they would do little skits, they would do little recitations. And they would spend the rest of the day coming up with a script for the next day. It'd be like little or no rehearsal, and they'd do it again. They did this for 13 years. Well, actually, Buddy Starcher did it from 1960 to 1963 until this, watch this. Okay. Problem is, it won't do it again. I don't think he'll do it again. But Buddy Starcher got what every musician dreams of in the country music field, at any rate, is a hit record. This was a recitation. He was a fine singer, a fine guitar player, but what made him his big break in Nashville was this recitation, and I'm sure some of you will recognize this. Can I get the drum roll, please?
Of their wives. President Lincoln's secretary, whose name was Kennedy, advised him not to go to the theater. President Kennedy's secretary, whose name was Lincoln, advised him not to go to Dallas. John Wilkes Booth shot Lincoln in a theater and ran to a warehouse. Lee Harvey Oswald shot Kennedy from a warehouse and ran to a theater. The names Lincoln and Kennedy each contain 7 letters. The names Andrew Johnson and Lyndon Johnson each contain 15 letters. The names John Wilkes Booth and Lee Harvey Oswald each contain 15 letters. And friends, it is true. History does repeat itself. This marching
when that song became a #1 hit in the country, he moved to Nashville. And Sleepy Jeffers stepped in. He was already part of the cast of the show. Sleepy Jeffers stepped in and it became the Sleepy Jeffers show. Sleepy Jeffers married, there was a group called the Davis Twins. So there's Sleepy Jeffers as, anybody recognize who that is? Uncle Willie. What he used to say, bicycle? Instead of saying goodbye, bicycle. It was a TV, that was an afternoon show, that was not part of the Sleepy Jeffers show. But this pair of brothers, this brother and sister pair, the Davis twins, were a part of the show from the very beginning. And they're both still alive. I had the pleasure of meeting them not long ago. Ivan Tribe, the author of this article, which is going to be in the next issue of Goldenseal, got a bunch of them together at Harding's restaurant. And we all passed pictures back and forth. And Honey and Sonny. Honey married Sleepy Jeffers, and they had a daughter who was part of the show. And they all had their own record labels. Buddy Starcher had one called BES for Bud E. Starcher. And Honey and Sonny was H&S Records. And this is one of their songs. Drum roll, please. See, it's not going to do it. Many of you might remember Doc Williams. Doc was a huge star. He just passed away a couple of years ago, but during his heyday, he was royalty. He and his whole family were royalty. In fact, his son, no, his grandson, is still the mayor of Wheeling, Andy McKenzie. But he was on WWVA for more than 50 years. The WWVA Jamboree, as we mentioned, got its start in the 1930s. I believe it was 1934. It got its start, and in the 1980s, Doc was still on a fairly regular basis on the Jamboree. He was a son of Slovak immigrants. His actual name is Andrew Smik. And one of the unique things and appealing things, and one of the keys to his success, was that he played that ethnic music. There would be polkas in the midst of the sentimental and country songs that he would play. Here's the 1937 version of his band. You can tell they were into the showbiz. The Western music theme was very popular at the time, and he was not shy about jumping on that bandwagon. And they played very smooth music. There was none of this hard-edged, nasally stuff. It was all very smooth music and very, very family-friendly, very wholesome. When their daughters, he married Chickie Williams, and she became part of the act, and their 3 daughters grew up in the entertainment business, Barbara, Karen, and Madeline, and they had stage names. I believe it was Peeper, Pumpkin, and Poochie. I don't know which one's the mother of the mayor, but they were very important people in Wheeling, wonderful folks. They were part of the Jamboree, which was an institution. The 50,000 watts WWVA, they focused that to go to the north and the east. So up in Maine, New Brunswick, even upstate New York, Buffalo, it came in just as clear as day, but down even as far as Charleston and Columbus and anywhere south and east, south and west of Wheeling, it was hard to pick it up. So they targeted the New England and maritime provinces, and they were huge up there. They could tour as much as they wanted to in that part of the world, and they're still very popular up there. This was at the Virginia Theater in Wheeling. He was quite an entrepreneur. He owned an amusement park, he owned an airport, and he owned this business downtown, Doc Williams Country General Store. And I'll give you a little taste of his sentimental, smooth style of music. I need that drum roll. It's not going to do it. See what we do, folks, every time. This was his theme song called My Old Brown Coat and Me.
was out, the stars were bright, the larks were singing free. I'm listening while I sing about my old brown coat and me. I lived upon my father's farm till I was 21. I took a farm then of my own and a man's life begun. I fell in love with Mary Braid, her father owned a store. There never was a girl beloved so tenderly before. But Mary Braid was very proud and haughty as could be. She oft-times said that she'd not wed my old brown coat and me. I did not stop to plead the case, for pleading was in vain. I bade adieu to Mary Braid, no saw her face again.
Goes on to tell the story of how he becomes rich and famous and she comes begging to have him back, but he won't have her. But that was his theme song. The other end of the spectrum musically was Molly O'Day and Lynn Davis. They were a musical couple from the Huntington area. She was a very talented young singer, and he was a little bit older and had a band called the 39ers, I think was a band name. And he hired her and her brother to be in the band. Living the right life now. There she is with her brother. Her name was Laverne Williamson, and she initially changed her name to stage name to Dixie Lee, and then after a while changed it to Molly O'Day was her stage name. She and Lynn fell in love when she joined the band. They became a couple and married, and he began to guide her career. There she is singing on the back of a truck in Beckley. I love this picture. She became immensely successful. In fact, Fred Rose of Hiccup Rose Publishing hired Hank Williams to write songs for Molly O'Day to record, and she recorded several of his early compositions. So they were on the road to fame and fortune when they had a religious conversion and decided it wasn't for them. They didn't like the lifestyle or the people they were being around, and just the whole taste of the thing just didn't suit them. So they came back to West Virginia. Lynn became a minister, baptized Molly in the Ohio River, and they undertook a life of ministry. And they were just as happy and pleased and never looked back. They lived out in Huntington, and he told me how many souls he saved one time. I can't remember. It was a big number. And she played banjo in church. And they lived out their lives without any regrets about what they left behind. Give that drum roll again. We need that drum roll again. See? That's the drum roll every time. She's playing the banjo even though he's holding the banjo in the picture. She was the banjo player and he was the guitarist.
When my time comes to go, when my time comes to go, I want to lay my head on Jesus' breast when my time comes to go.
I got to know Lynn Davis quite well in the later years of his life. I got to meet him when we were working on the story, and he and I just hit it off, and I got visited with him many times. He had a radio studio in the back of his house, and he would, every day after lunch, he'd sign on to the radio. He was reported to be the oldest gospel music DJ still on the air in the United States. He was 84 at the time. And he had a big radio voice. And he would read the ads right out of the paper, and he would talk to Molly like she was listening up in heaven. And one day he just sat down on the couch, and that was the end for him. So he was a wonderful man. I really enjoyed getting to know him. One interesting thing is that Molly had a cousin whose stage name was Blaze Star. And Lynn was good friends with her. He had a picture of her with her tassels and nothing else much other than a banjo. He said that Molly got famous playing the banjo. She thought she'd try it too. So. Blaze still lives out in Wayne County somewhere. I don't think she dances anymore. Joel and Jim McCoy. We're coming down to the home stretch here, so don't despair. Here's an example of what I guess you'd have to call a local artist. Molly O'Day and Doc Williams and some of these other people made it on a national or at least a regional scale. Jim McCoy never quite broke into that, but he's up in Berkeley, up in Morgan County, owns a little nightclub called the Troubadour. Morgan County's country music troubadour. And his big claim to fame was that he claims to have discovered Patsy Cline. Let me read what it says here about him. It's written by John Douglas, the editor of the Morgan Messenger. It says, nothing, however, quite stood out like the morning in 1946 when a 14-year-old girl named Virginia Hensley walked in and asked to sing with the band. I talked to the boys and they said, yes, let's give her a chance, says Jim. He was just 17 himself, but he already had a reputation for sharing his stage and mic with other performers. The girl, who in the 1950s would be better known as Patsy Cline, bowled everyone over. She became part of the band, and he stayed in close contact with her throughout her life and career, and still has a Patsy Cline tribute, and is good friends with her widower, Charlie Dick. So Jim McCoy had a career of his own. He has a record label and a publishing company, and written and recorded a number of songs. Joel and Jim McCoy. He's an energetic performer. I love this picture, though. It never quite worked out for Jim. He's got the suit coat, he's got the record, he's sitting at home on a Friday night. He's got a nice little nightclub. He has his own little country music hall of fame there in the back room. He inducts a few people here and there if he feels like it. Here's a little taste of his music. Get that drum roll going, please. Come on, keep it going, keep it going, keep it going. There we go, there we go. He was strictly Nashville when it came to his musical style.
While I was out of town, I started thinking of all the things we do when I return. I could see you sitting home and oh how true you'd be. If the truth is gonna hurt just slightly, I'd rather hear your lies and know that you don't care. For all the truth would do to me is bring me tears. So keep me in the dark so I can never see. If the truth is gonna hurt just slightly, just
Nashville all the way. Well, this is going to be our last little segment here. One of the great pleasures as editor of Goldenseal was getting to know Hazel Dickens. I actually had met her when I was working for the Augusta Heritage Center at Davis-Nelkins College, but got to know her even better. She was an avid Goldenseal reader. She gave, I don't know, 8 or 10 subscriptions as gifts for every year for Christmas time. And she'd call me up when the magazine would come out and talk to me about this or that story and suggest things. I would call her every few. You never called Hazel if you had less than an hour to talk. A wonderful woman, and her music crosses every boundary. Every boundary. She's part bluegrass, part country, part Appalachian mountain ballads. Even she just was in a class all her own. She grew up in poverty in Mercer County. She was one of 11 children of a disabled father, and many of her brothers lived in the area and worked in the mines. Her dad and brothers, they cut railroad ties for the mines, for the tracks in the mines. But then in the 1950s, the mines began to close down and the family kind of dispersed, and many of them went up to the Baltimore area, where Hazel went. Can you see her there playing the bass? There's Hazel right there with the bass. Anybody recognize this fellow? That's Mike Seeger. Some of you might know Mike Seeger, Pete Seeger's brother. And Hazel kind of came into her own as a musician and discovered a talent for writing songs. One called West Virginia, My Home, is actually sung in churches in Gilmer County. There it is in her own handwriting. Her songs are deeply emotional. A lot of them are about West Virginia and her thoughts about labor, women's issues, and relationships. She was a West Virginia treasure. I was going to read something about her, but anyway, she recorded 11 albums. Her songs have been recorded by Johnny Cash, Dolly Parton, New Riders of the Purple Sage, Hot Rise. Lots of people sing Hazel Dickens songs, but nobody sings it like Hazel. So let me get that drum roll one more time. Come on, come on, come on, come on, come on. It's not working really quick. There we go. It's the magic.
West Virginia, oh my home. West Virginia's where I belong. In the dead of the night, in the still and the quiet, I slip away like a bird in flight back to those hills, the place that I call home. It's been years now since I left there, and this city life's about got the best of me. I can't remember why I left so free, what I wanted to do, what I wanted to see, but I can sure remember where I come from. West Virginia, oh my home. West Virginia's where I belong. In the dead of the night, in the still and the quiet, I slip away like a bird in flight back to those hills, the place that I call home. Well, I paid the price for the leaving, and this life I have is not one I thought I'd find. Well, let me live, love, let me cry when I go, just let me die among the friends who where I belong. In the dead of the night, in the still and the quiet, I slip away like a bird in flight back to those hills, the place that I call home. Home, home, home. Oh, I can see it so clear in my mind. Home, home, home. I can almost smell the honeysuckle vine. In the dead of the night, in the still and the quiet, I slip away like a bird in flight back to those hills, the place that I call home. Home.
There you have it. Do we have time for one more song? Sure. All right. I've been influenced by all these people, especially Hank Williams and Hazel Dickens, I guess. There's a bunch of them, but this is a song here. When I read these manuscripts, like I tell you, I read every one that comes in. Some of them sound a little fishy. This song comes out of some dubious claims that have been made in Goldenseal manuscripts. Now listen here, sonny, when I was your age, I walked 5 miles to school uphill both ways. I done it. Yeah, I done it. Done it once and I don't care to do it again. I was born in the country, raised up on a farm, grew green beans as big as your arm. I done it. Yeah, I done it. Done it once and I don't care to do it again. Built a 10-room house about a mile from here, fed a family of 4 on $1 a year. I done it. Yeah, I done it. Done it once and I don't care to do it again. Cut a coat of firewood and put it in stack, both arms tied behind my back. I done it. Yeah, I done it. Done it once and I don't care to do it again. Had no electricity, so every night watched TV by candlelight. I done it. Yeah, I done it. Done it once and I don't care to do it again. But I rode a motorcycle through the middle of town, playing my fiddle and turned around. I done it. Yeah, I done it. Done it once and I don't care to do it again. In the wintertime, snow piled 10 feet high, but didn't shovel or walk till the 4th of July. I done it. Yeah, I done it. Done it once and I don't care to do it again. You can take it to the bank, half of what I say. I never let the truth get in the way. I done it. Yeah, I done it. Done it once and I don't care to do it again. Yodelay, yodelay, oh, yodelay. Bobby and Mary and everybody else here at the library. We do have some Goldenseal books for sale up here. I'd be glad to take your subscriptions or take it home and send in the little cards inside the back cover. I do have some CDs for sale here. I'm going to be playing at the Bluegrass Kitchen every Thursday in February with my band Blue Yonder. also be on Mountain Stage on February 24th. So thank you again for coming out here. You've been great. I appreciate the drum rolls. Helped out a lot. Thank you again.
Many thanks for coming, and I think it was a beautiful program. A lot of great music and beautiful presentation. Let's hear it again for John Love.